again, everybody. It is time for the Silver Bullets podcast. Once again, I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, we made it. It is game week as the Ohio State Buckeyes will be in the Horseshoe this Saturday to face the Nebraska Cornhuskers in the season opener, the latest season opener of our lifetimes, at noon, and big noon kickoff for the Buckeyes and Huskers.
Can't get here soon enough.
It's been a crazy offseason. It's finally just about over. I don't want to jinx anything because God knows in 2020 anything can happen and has happened. Right. You know, and it happens quickly. 1 minute Nick Saban has COVID-19 and the next minute Nick Saban suddenly doesn't have COVID-19 and he's on the sideline against Georgia. So anything can happen. Anything has happened. Mississippi State can beat a ranked team and then score 2 points against Kentucky. I mean, crazy stuff's happening.
I'm just so anxious to see Big Ten football after, being, so to speak, on the sidelines these past few weeks, to finally see the teams that you and I, especially Ohio State, the teams that we're more familiar with and the teams that we follow. So hopefully we'll get some better results on the field. I'm not going to hold my breath, though, because I think there's going to be some natural sloppiness due to a lack of spring and completely disjointed summer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know about you, but for me, it just hasn't quite felt like college football season watching ACC and Big 12 and SEC games and not having the Big Ten and not having the Pac-12 and not having the MAC. It just hasn't felt like football season yet.
No, that's exactly it. It just feels like it felt like something was missing because it was. When you're talking about the Big Ten, you're talking about the Pac-12, you're talking about the MAC, all these conferences that we're familiar with, that we're accustomed to seeing, not participating. It definitely it has definitely been a noticeable absence.
Chip, the big noon kickoff game this past week was Kansas and West Virginia. Who is responsible for this?
The Big Ten, because they screwed up their whole situation. That's who's responsible for it.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, my friend. Okay, so last week we gave our predictions, our bold predictions. We put our money where our mouth is, although we didn't really put any money on it, of how we think that the Western Division of the Big Ten would shake out in the 2020 COVID season. And this week we're going to talk about the Eastern Division in the Big Ten. So the Big East, not to be confused with the, what is it? There's a defunct football conference and still a basketball conference. What's going on with the Big East?
Yeah, I think the Big East is a basketball conference, but don't hold me to that. Again, 2020 is a weird year.
Yeah, exactly. In some ways, I just feel like I'm asleep all of the time, and yet I'm still tired. That's kind of been 2020 for me. I feel like I'm constantly, just got out of bed kind of thing.
Yeah, somebody said it truly does feel like that movie Groundhog Day, that it's very difficult to differentiate one day from the next, because when you're not going out like you used to, when you're not going to work like you used to, that kind of thing, like a lot of our listeners probably can relate to that it's very difficult for one day to kind of seem just like the previous several. So I agree with you. I think there's a natural fatigue that kind of just sets in.
Well, I'm going to say that we probably get a mulligan on selecting the Big Ten Eastern Division projected winner. I think both of us will have the same answer to this. And people can feel free to call us homers, but I don't feel like it is a hot take to say that I think we're both going to pick Ohio State to win the East.
Yes, that's very bold, very, very gutsy, but yeah, that's accurate.
It's kind of like picking Alabama to win their division, right?
Certainly. Yeah.
Not a whole lot of controversy in that pick. Although, again, you never know what will happen. If something happened to Justin Fields, if a couple of players had to sit out a couple weeks for a positive test or whatever, you never know what could happen. So, we're not trying to jinx anything or tempt fate, but I think that's just kind of how we see it. And I think that's probably pretty much universal. I mean, even Homer Penn State fans or Michigan fans would probably, if they're being honest, would probably predict Ohio State to win the division again this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's a Homer element, but there's also a realistic element. And I think, like you just said, I think Penn State, Michigan fans would, if there is any objectivity within those fan bases, they would probably say the same thing.
Now, I would also say that probably I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that we will both have Penn State second.
Yes, that's not going out on a limb. That's I think, as objective as we can possibly be. I think the talent, the schedule, I think it favors Penn State to be second in the Big Ten East.
All right, so I'm putting it down. Ohio State 1, Penn State 2. As we saw last week, we were very much on the same page for our predictions. But things will get a little bit murkier as we go down the list. And I think, for me anyway, this is where things start to get a little bit tricky, where that 3 spot is concerned. So why don't you go first and tell me what you think third place Big Ten Eastern Division this year?
Well, maybe this falls under that category of going out on a limb. Maybe I'm letting some of my let me rephrase that. Letting some of my bias towards a certain program cloud my judgment. But I'm gonna actually predict this is the year that the Indiana Hoosiers finish ahead of that team up north and finish third in the Big Ten East. I think the talent that they have coming back, the fact that they actually get Penn State this coming weekend. Now, I think Penn State's going to win, but I think it's going to be closer than Penn State fans would probably want to acknowledge that. But I'm not going to be surprised that in a couple weeks, on November 7th, I think Indiana has it within them to upset the Wolverines, and I think they have enough talent to finish third in the Big Ten East.
Okay. Going out on that limb for the number 3 team in the East, you're going with the Indiana Hoosiers. Man, I would love to pick the Hoosiers because I think you're right. I think they're returning some talent. I think they have a good team, a solid team, but I just don't know if they can get over their Indiana-ness. I mean, it's if you're an Indiana player or if you're an Indiana fan, there's an inherent, oh no, what's going to happen to screw this up thought in your mind kind of probably at all times, I'm guessing. Because it just kind of seems to happen that way. I think every year people say, oh, this is the year that Indiana gets Michigan. And they just don't seem to do it. And I think Michigan is certainly a team that's full of question marks. They've got 4 new starters on the offensive line, some questions at wide receiver, some questions with the defensive line depth, or at least the defensive end depth. I don't know. But at the same time, I still think that Michigan's got a talent advantage, and I'm going to go ahead and pick them because until Indiana shows me that this is actually the year and they can get them, then I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to buy it because I've been down that road before. I've watched the games. I've sat there thinking, okay, it's 28-28 in the third quarter. I'm listening. And then Michigan wins by 3 or 4 touchdowns. So I've seen that movie before, and I'm not ready to commit to it, but I would love to see it.
No, I completely respect that. It was not an easy decision. Kind of what led me to selecting Indiana was, I respect Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback because he's one of those players who's coming back. They have talent at the running back position. talented wide receiver. Say what you will about, Tom Allen. But I think he has probably done as good a job as you and I have probably seen at that head coaching position. Now granted, I think he came into a situation that was not nearly as bad. But that being the case, I think Indiana, I think they have the talent, and I think they probably, like you said, like they look at, some of these games and they just need one of them to get over the hump. They lost to Penn State last year by a touchdown. Like you said, like they're used to hanging around Michigan and then getting, beat, in the fourth quarter. I just think this is the year that they do it. And maybe I'll be kicking myself in a couple of weeks, but I really do think Indiana can do it. And this is the year I'm going to pick Indiana to finish third.
Okay. Well, I'm not too far behind you. Again, it's kind of a little bit of a coin flip. I just, I'm a very much show me kind of guy. Show me this is the year you can get them. And then I'll think that there might be some years that you can actually get them. And they haven't been showing me. So I'm going Michigan third, but I am going Indiana fourth. And, for all of the reasons you just enumerated, really, I think Indiana I think they have the potential to beat, to pull some upsets this year. But I also feel like there's still that inherent Indiana-ness about them that could also get them beaten by a team that they should beat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely, it was not an easy decision. It was one of these things where, by logic, I have Michigan fourth. I think Michigan, the fact that by the season's end, I fully anticipate the offensive line to be better. But that's why this coming weekend, I think that game against Minnesota is going to speak volumes. I mean, the fact that Michigan is replacing 4 starters on that offensive line. And I have immense respect for Ed Warner as an offensive line coach. But as I said a few moments ago, I think a lack of spring football, a lack of summer practices, I think it's going to impact all the programs because we've kind of seen that with some of the teams that we've seen play so far. So I don't think any teams within the Big Ten are going to be immune, especially Michigan. I think breaking in a new quarterback, wide receiver is a position of concern for the Wolverines because they lost Nico Collins, who's arguably their best wide receiver. I just think that offensively, I think Michigan, they're going to struggle enough that I think some of the games, I think they'll win, and they'll be far more competitive by the end of the season. Not enough for Ohio State, but they'll be far more competitive. But I just think that in a couple of weeks, going on the road to Bloomington, I think Indiana will beat them, and that'll be enough to give the Hoosiers the third spot, the Wolverines the fourth spot.
Well, let me ask you this. If this is the year that Indiana gets Michigan, and let's say Ohio State and Penn State also beat Michigan, is that it for Jim Harbaugh?
I don't think so. I think he's going to get – the reason I'm kind of stammering and hemming and hawing on it, I think he's going to get the benefit of the doubt because of the whole 2020, this is a unforeseen year kind of thing. But it's interesting to see that he's going into what like next year will be the last year on his contract, and they have not extended. So the reason why I'm kind of, I don't want to say, oh yeah, he's out, is I really don't know what direction the administration would possibly want to go, because the rumors of a lot of strife between the president of the university and Jim Harbaugh during the whole Big Ten coronavirus suspension of the season. it just makes you wonder, like if Harbaugh can't get it done, I don't know who they turn to. I really don't know who they would turn to that, because this has been the guy that I think almost every Wolverine fan has been pointing to as like, this is the guy that's going to get it turned around. I don't think this will be it, but if something doesn't emerge from like the on the contract side, it's going to definitely be, bearing watching, going into 2021 for certain.
How long will it take rumors to surface of a mega offer to Urban Meyer?
The rumors I think this is just one man's opinion. I believe Urban Meyer is done. I genuinely think that just the whole he kind of in a manner of speaking, I know it's a completely different realm. I think he's kind of almost taken almost like the Bill Cowher step back approach and be like, this isn't that bad. This is not bad at all, because I get to talk about college football, get paid handsomely for it, get flown out, to and from. I get to relax in the beautiful Florida home that I have in the off season. Oh, I get to be grandpa, and I don't have to worry about breaking down film, recruiting kids. I don't have to worry about the painful cyst in my skull whenever I feel stressed. I mean, that's why I genuinely believe Urban Meyer is done. I mean, for all the rumors, I know you were talking about Michigan. All the rumors of, like Texas is going to come after him. I really think he's done. I really do. And
yeah.
I have a belief that who Michigan would target, and I have no doubt that Urban Meyer would be on that short list, but I just think he would politely say, guys, I'm done. I really do.
I agree with you. I think that he's unless there was some way to medically improve his situation, I don't think that he would go back to that again, because he just looked miserable his last couple of years there, really. So why don't we wrap up our Big Ten East predictions? I predict we're going to be the same in 5, 6, and 7. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to say that I think we would both maybe put Michigan State, Maryland, Rutgers in that order at 5, 6, and 7, or is that just me? Do you have a different order for the bottom?
I have a slightly different one. I actually have Maryland 5.
Okay.
Michigan State 6, Rutgers 7. And here's where I genuinely feel bad is this coming weekend is Rutgers at Michigan State. I think this is the kind of thing where, all right, you've got both Rutgers and Michigan State with coaching turnover, player turnover. I keep going back to it, but it meant so much, the fact that there was no spring practice and the summers were not. We both saw, and I'm sure our listeners can remember, there were stories of coronavirus outbreaks on both campuses of Michigan State and Rutgers. So I really think this is okay. Like, if you're Mel Tucker, if you're gonna, it's gonna be a rebuilding year for, let's just say, like, Greg Schiano, he knows he has a rebuilding situation. Mel Tucker, he has a rebuilding situation. I mean, he was hired in March, for God's sakes. I think Michigan State, I think that they pull out all the stops and do whatever they can, and they eke out a win. But then it's in the words of the late great George Harrison, I think it's going to be a long, cold, lonely winter in both. After that one, because it's just going to, I think that they both have to build for the future, but I think Michigan State wins it. So that gives them the edge at number 6 over Rutgers at number 7.
All right, I'm going to stick with Sparty. I think that they have some talent there. I like Mel Tucker. I believe in him. I think he'll elevate them faster than people think. Maybe not quite to where they want to be or where they feel like they should be or where they have been. But so I have both have Ohio State, Penn State. Then you have Indiana. I have Michigan at 3. I have Indiana. You have Michigan at 4. Then I have Michigan State at 5, and you have Maryland. I have Maryland at 6. You have Michigan State. We both have Rutgers, bringing up the bottom for Greg Schiano's first year there. So there it is. They're locked in. Those are our predictions. And we're going to live with them. So people come back and taunt us at the end of the year. That's fine. We have thick skin. We can take it. Chip, we have a game to talk about. We're going to talk amongst ourselves about it, Ohio State and Nebraska. But before we do that, we're going to get to our guest. That's right. We have a guest this week on the Silver Bullets podcast. We're going to get to that guest and discuss the Buckeyes and the Huskers. We'll do that right after this. All right, joining us on the Silver Bullets podcast this week, we're very happy to have with us the deputy editor at Hail Varsity, Erin Sorensen. Did I get that right, Erin?
You did. It was perfect. Perfect.
Erin, thanks so much for being with us here on the Silver Bullets this week.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, exciting times. We're finally going to get the 2020 season started. And I just kind of wanted to get you, first of all, to kind of give us an overview of what Nebraska fans kind of think that is going to happen for their team in 2020. What are the expectations?
Ooh. You know, I think realistically, the smart answer for that is probably just not to have any expectations. The one thing going into a COVID-19 season is that anything and everything can happen. You know, I don't think Nebraska is going 8-0 this season, but I don't think they're going 0-8. So if I'm a Nebraska fan, I think a lot of people when I've talked, and I guess I'm excluding, that ninth championship weekend game where I just conveniently forget about that all the time. But regardless, I think most Husker fans that I've talked to are somewhere around, if you include that extra game, 4-5. If it ended up being like 5-4 or greater, that just feels like a huge win. So I think people are pretty realistic that Nebraska, when they are in Ohio Stadium on Saturday, that will be the first time that they've hit anyone other than themselves in 10.5 months. It's going to be an uphill battle. There's just no way around that. But there's talent on this team, so it could still be it could be an interesting season. And as we've seen elsewhere, anything is possible if somebody gets the right shot on the right day. But I don't know if Ohio State's going to be necessarily that team, but it could still be a good game.
So, Erin, I have a question for you regarding Scott Frost. And I freely admit, and this is not meant in a bad way, like last year, I was one of these people who, having seen the tremendous job he did before coming back home to Nebraska, I really thought the return of Nebraska, to being a elite program within the Big Ten was going to happen last year. You know as well as I do that it was a challenging year. So I guess my long-winded question to you is, what's the general feeling amongst the fans as, Scott Frost? I mean, he's a, that returning conquering hero, is the bloom off the rose, so to speak. I mean, like, where does it kind of fall in terms of what the fans, their view and expectations of Scott Frost as the rebuilder of Nebraska?
Yeah, I think, it depends on who you talk to, as it is with most fan bases. There are fans that you'd be able to find if it was safe to just walk into a bar and randomly start talking to people right now. There are some fans who are like, he's not what Nebraska signed up for. He's not what was sold. He's not the coach that we expected. And then there are plenty of people who are like, it's year 3. In Nebraska has been on this like roller coaster for so long, and we don't have the time or really anybody, I can't imagine that an Ohio State listener would be really into dissecting Nebraska's problems over the last 25 years, or 20 years, since I guess 2001, when that was the last time. I feel like people kind of point to that 2001 season as sort of the last time Nebraska was relevant on the national stage in some ways. And a lot has happened over that time. And one of the things is the inconsistency in leadership, the inconsistency in coaching. There's just been so much turnover, so many people with different ideas about what Nebraska can and should be, how to restore it, that at some point you have to just kind of settle down. And maybe things haven't gone exactly as people were hoping, but Central Florida and Nebraska were in two very different positions. I always have to remind people that when Scott Frost inherited Central Florida, they were a team coming off of a winless season. However, they had just recently been to a bowl game prior to that. It's not like he walked into a team that was completely did not know how to win. This Nebraska team, honestly, the way I tell people is you can get the culture there, you can do all of that stuff, but until the team learns how to win, that's a hurdle that this team hasn't figured out. And Scott is working on it. At least that's what coaches are supposed to do. But, for the fans who are like, who's next? Which I don't think there's very many, but, they're always the loudest on Twitter. It wouldn't do you any good because you'd be starting back over and it would just be the same cycle once again. So I think most people are fairly reasonable about what's going on, but you can find anyone to agree or disagree with any point, especially when it comes to Nebraska football.
Erin, one of the players that was a standout for Nebraska is not with the program anymore. A name that Ohio State fans are obviously familiar with, Spielman. He was a very impressive player there. And, I think a lot of Ohio State fans Nebraska falls off their radar after they play, and then they maybe don't pay that much attention to him. What can you tell us about the J.D. Spielman situation and why he transferred to TCU and what that means for the Cornhuskers?
Yeah, I mean, losing J.D. was he was a big part of Nebraska's offense. I don't think it was a fit between him and Scott Frost. Everything that we heard toward the end of his career at Nebraska, and even since he's gone to TCU, he's done a number of interviews where, you hear things that he doesn't have any regrets about it. It feels like it just wasn't meant to be. The relationship between Scott Frost and J.D. Spielman wasn't sunshine and rainbows. And I think sometimes, I think sometimes we assume that players, when in JD's defense, he was not recruited by Scott Frost and the staff. So that's another layer, but we always kind of assume that they're all going to get along. But it's like, I don't like everyone. You don't like everyone. Not everything is going to be perfect. And I always hesitate to say that because I think sometimes people immediately go to a lack of respect. I don't know if there's so much a lack of respect there. I think Scott respects the heck out of J.D. Spielman and what he was able to do. I think J.D. respected Scott Frost. They didn't mesh well for whatever reason that, is between them, and it's not on us to project. Now, I know he's been very vocal on his mental health and having struggles at Nebraska. I think it seems like, at least from my perspective, that he seems happier at TCU, and it stinks to lose that production for Nebraska, but these are those times where you realize it's bigger than football. And I even think that this staff recognizes, yes, that would be nice to have, but if he's in a better spot for himself, that's okay. So it's one of those things where I think forever, until one of them decides to do a tell-all, there will always be little questions. But it happens and it stinks, but I think it'll be better for everyone in the long run.
So you brought up the fact that J.D. Spielman was not recruited by Scott Frost. So why don't we talk about a player who was recruited by Scott Frost, and he was also recruited by Ohio State. And I'm talking about Adrian Martinez, who was named the starter. But my question is, how close of a battle was that between Adrian Martinez and Luke Mccaffey? Because from an outsider's perspective, it certainly seems like the Nebraska offense completely revolves around Adrian Martinez. So it seemed kind of surprising that there was that much of a quarterback battle to begin with.
Yeah, Luke Mccaffey, by everything that we know, is an incredible athlete. We know he's fast. That's the thing that we do know that about him. He has the speed that Adrian Martinez does not. The question that we've all had is, what about the arm? Is Luke sincerely a better passer than Adrian? Because if he is, that's kind of game over, in my opinion, because how do you justify somebody how would you justify not starting somebody who has the speed, has the arm? But like you said, Scott Frost did come out today, being on Monday, and saying that the guy is Adrian. However, I just want to read what he said. He said, "First, let me say I don't know how much separation there is. I think we have two first-string quarterbacks. That's how we feel about them." He also had prefaced that if the shoe had been on the other foot and McCaffrey had been the one who had started for 2 years and then was coming into this fall camp and everything had gone as it has, he might have had the nod. It's just Adrian's getting the nod because he has the experience. Now, I think to a degree, at least this is me projecting, I think some of this is also a challenge from Scott, because we know that Adrian is his guy. You don't fly across the country basically right after you win you're basically UCF had just gone undefeated and he's on a plane across the country to go get Adrian Martinez for Nebraska. You don't do that if this guy isn't going to be who you want. And to be fair, Scott being a former quarterback, he knows what that relationship with the coach is, and having that respect and that loyalty, he gets all of this. But he has also been pretty forthcoming that Adrian didn't prepare for his sophomore season the way that they wanted to. So whether it's a challenge from Frost, whether it really sincerely is Luke McCaffrey is as good as we've been told, and I think that is a big part of it. Hopefully we see a better Adrian. Hopefully we see the Adrian that that we all saw his freshman season, because he has a lot of talent. However, I don't think any opponent, and I'm sure Ohio State already knows this, you can't not prepare for Luke McCaffrey. You don't have that kind of talent sitting on your sideline and not utilize him. He's going to be in that game, whether he comes in for a series at quarterback. He could line up at receiver. He could be in the backfield. He's somebody where I wouldn't surprise. He could be literally anywhere on the field, and I wouldn't be that surprised. He's too talented not to. So opposing teams are going to know that. The only way you're fooling Ohio State is if you throw Luke McCaffrey out there for the first series on Saturday. That's the only way you might throw someone for a loop. But Adrian is Scott's guy, and until he gives him a reason that he's not, it doesn't surprise me that he said that they're rolling with him on Saturday.
Well, I for one look forward to Luke McCaffrey at left tackle.
Right? At this point, throw him at safety. Maybe he could play center. I'm just kidding. He needs to put on a little more weight for that one.
Erin, we know about Dedrick Mills and Wandale Robinson. Who are some of the other playmakers on that Nebraska offense that might flash this year?
I'm going to pull up my roster because I did this the other day, where I will be honest with you, this roster has flipped so quickly in just a couple of years that I feel like my own brain can't keep up with them. So like you said, you brought up Wandale Robinson. He's going to focus mostly. He's going to stay mostly with receiver this year. You won't see him with the running backs as much, which is actually really interesting because he got beat up last year. So I'm curious to see him. I know you said people already are familiar. I'm actually curious for people to see him now just in that role, because I think that this will also change how just the way he operates as a weapon for Nebraska. And they need him now, especially when you think about the fact that J.D. Spielman has gone. One name that I hesitate to say, because there's a little bit of uncertainty around whether or not he'll play against Ohio State, or maybe what's going on. He may not travel. Omar Manning is a wide receiver that was brought into Nebraska that, from everything that we have been told, is fantastic. When he's in practice, when he's there, things are great. As for what's going on, we haven't been given a lot. He tweeted that he's not opting out. There were some rumors going around about that. I don't know how much Ohio State might see him, or if he'll even be on the travel roster for Saturday. But he is somebody that, if you are a Big Ten fan, keep an eye on Omar Manning's name along the line. Now, running back is fairly, outside of Dedrick Mills, is pretty there's a ton of really talented players here. You have Ronald Tompkins, who's had a number of people talking about him. Marvin Scott is a freshman that has had some, people talk. Ramir Johnson, but everybody's really unproven. They're redshirt freshmen. They're freshmen. It's hard to know what you're going to get with that. I will give a totally dark horse answer here. If I'm an opposing team, keep an eye on Nebraska's tight ends. Scott Frost has been recruiting a basketball team at tight end. When you look at Kurt Raftel, who's 6'7", Travis Vokalek, who's 6'6", let's see who else is. Austin Allen is 6'8". He literally has a basketball team out there at tight end. But these tight ends are supposed to be getting utilized more in 2020. We'll see. I hope they do. They're definitely tall enough for it. So I'd keep an eye on that position specifically, and guys like Travis Vokalek, who we've heard a lot about. It'll be fun to see if they do get them more involved. And like I said, if not, they can just loan him out to Fred Hoiberg in the basketball team if they need him.
Well, let's talk about somebody who was playing tight end, but now it's been moved to center. So it's kind of almost like following Michael's, like his request to see Luke McCaffrey at tackle. But in all seriousness, Cam Jurgens is a tight end who made the transition from tight end to center. And the reason why I want to bring this up is, again, showing my age here. I'm thinking back to, the traditional Nebraska teams that I think most college football fans, the powerful offensive lines that the Cornhuskers would have year in, year out, that would lead to these just massive rushing totals that you pick up when you would see, the Nebraska ran for 400 yards against some poor team or whatever kind of a thing. Can you talk a little bit about the offensive line and kind of the status of that?
Yeah, actually, oddly enough, the offensive line is expected to be one of the most experienced parts of Nebraska's team. I'm not even going to say offense, the entire team this fall. And it's kind of wild because I feel like we have been, to use this word from earlier, on a roller coaster with this offensive line. Some years it's like they can't get anything figured out. Some years it feels like all of the talent is there and it just doesn't come together. This is a group that is not only talented, but has the experience. I honestly, to a point where I'm like, they have so many guys that could be rotating in. Now, Cameron Jurgens, when he was plucked away from being a tight end, he had to put on some serious weight. He was learning a position that he was not familiar with. There were some hiccups. We saw some of those hiccups, especially early in 2019. One of them being the first couple of games of that last season were really rough. There were some miscues, some bad snaps. There was some snaps where Adrian Martinez had his arm. It looked like he was yanking it off of his body trying to get that. It got a lot better as the season went on, and I imagine that it's only better. And he looks better. So he looks like he's not only put on the weight, but has put it on in a way now that he can utilize it. It's good size. Whereas before it was just get bigger. But yeah, Matt Lubick said that they're the strength, in his opinion, of the entire football team, and he's Nebraska's new offensive coordinator. Greg Austin, the offensive line coach, has been made the run game coordinator. So there's a lot of attention there on having this really, really stout offensive line. And I think they're putting the guys in place. I could just I won't bore everyone with it, but you can just go look at, he already told us, you can visit hailvarsity.com. Like I said, I won't go through it all, but they already basically told us the two deep on the offensive line. What other position can do that on this team? Basically, no other position is quite that solid, but they already know they're too deep. So this is going to be fun. I hope they live up to sort of the hype that's surrounding them, because it's, to be quite frank, about damn time.
Why don't we change over the other side of the ball now? From what I can tell, it seems like Nebraska has a lot of size on the defensive line, and it looks like a fairly decent secondary. Is linebacker the concern on that defense?
Yep. So the big concern with the defensive line is just inexperience, but there's a ton of talent there. They have so many guys that they can rotate in and out, that where you're concerned about experience, you can kind of overlook it because they're so good. They'll be all right. There'll be some learning. There's going to be some growing pains, but it'll be fine. The secondary is definitely the bright spot of the defense. There's a ton of talent there. Guys who weren't healthy in 2019 are healthy now, like Deontay Williams. It's going to be a big deal for them. But yeah, linebacker, they've had to shift guys from outside to inside. They've had to move some guys around. It seems like that's the one spot where we're still asking a lot of questions even today. How's Nick Henrich doing? And I always butcher his last name. So if somebody's listening is like, that's not how you say it, you're right. I'm just going to tell you you're right. But like, how's he doing? He just shifted. What about this? And I mean, we're just still asking questions with linebacker. So that's a little bit of a concern too, when you have a newer group at defensive line, because you need that linebacker group to be a little bit more solid. So hopefully they're a pleasant surprise. There's enough, in my opinion, I think there's enough talent there. It's just not certain what's going on.
So let's staying on the defensive side of the ball. A player who's extremely versatile, Taylor Britt. Can we talk about him in terms of? I mean, because it seems like it's basically if they could clone him and play him multiple positions, they would do that. But can you give our listeners an idea in terms of what kind of a player Taylor Britt is?
Yeah, the word I would use for him is versatile. He is just, like you said, if you could clone him, he is exactly what you want. Teams want a roster of Taylor Britts because he not only has the passion, but he has the talent to back it up. But that passion, he knows how to use it in a way that's so. It's funny saying that because when he was a freshman, he was doing some really stupid things. Like he would be unnecessarily putting himself in harm's way to make a tackle where you're like, he's going to break his arm or he's going to pull his shoulder out of the socket, what he's doing. But what we were seeing then is just someone who had a lot of passion for what he was doing and gives 110% of himself at all times. Now he's learned how to channel that a little bit differently, where he's not quite as like all over the place now. He knows how to channel that into, I would say, being a little more effective at his position, but he's always just been insanely talented and he's just versatile. I mean, there's a reason that his coaches say he can just he could shift all over. And he even makes jokes sometimes that if they ever need him at quarterback, they should just throw him there because he actually was a high school quarterback. And he jokes about how he's faster than Luke McCaffrey. And honestly, I'd love to see that race. If they ever want to line him up, I'd love to watch him go for it. That's the word I'd say is versatile. So if you're any opposing team going against him, you have to be ready for him to do just about anything because he is 100% what has been sold. There is no hype too great for him. So again, like you said, you wish you had an entire team of that because you can't have one player be everything. But the good part is he's got a great group around him. Like you look at like guys, like I said, Deontay Williams is back, DiCaprio Bootle, Markel Dismuke. There's a number of guys that are going to make his job easier too in 2020, and he'll make their job easier. So he's gonna be fun to watch. He's a heck of a player and he's a heck of a personality, and that's always fun to watch.
Erin, before we let you go, I want to put you on the spot and get your. I want to get your score prediction for Saturday's game, Nebraska and Ohio State. What are you thinking?
Okay, so I have been thinking about this for a while, and I don't know if I like my answer anymore. So I'm just going to be completely honest. This was about like a month ago when I was talking about this, and I'm even pulling up my notes from this. But this was about about 3 weeks ago, that obviously Ohio State, I would say there's some turnover with the defense. So there's some opportunities there for an offense to get some points. So I thought like about 3 weeks ago that it was going to be a shootout. But I don't mean a shootout in the sense that it's close. I just mean a lot of points.
Okay.
So I had something like 56-35, somewhere in that range, where Nebraska puts up a lot of points. Ohio State just puts up a heck of a lot more. Obviously, we know that the line opened as a 21.5-point favorite for Ohio State. So I've kind of backed off of that a little bit. I could see it being like 56 to like 28. I don't think it's going to be quite as rough as some of the past ones for Nebraska. My question then for Nebraska fans is, if Nebraska gets out of Ohio Stadium with a few 3 touchdowns and a couple of field goals, do you feel okay about that? And I would. There's no moral victories, I know, but I would still feel okay. So I think we'll see points. I just don't see Ohio State letting Nebraska get too close. I think maybe Nebraska makes it interesting for the first half. And by interesting, I mean is still probably not winning, just trailing, but not by a lot. I think Ohio State probably takes off with it in the third and then like coasts through the fourth, but Nebraska at least gets some points on the board. I would take that way more than some of the other games I've watched in Ohio Stadium. So I'll stick around there, but I'm starting to question myself.
Well, we all do when we make predictions. It's just the nature of the beast. It has been great.
This year's so hard. I'm sorry,
really,
I cut you off really quick, but that's the other part. I have no idea what to do with this year. I mean, they haven't hit anyone in 10.5 months. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Exactly.
So you can all tell me I'm wrong on Twitter when I'm wrong. It's fine. I respect it. I'm here.
That's the one thing about 2020 is you never know what's coming next. It's crazy.
No idea.
Well, Erin Sorensen, the deputy editor for Hail Varsity, where can people find you on the internets?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Erin Sorensen. It's S-E-N, though, on Sorensen. Don't go looking for S-O-N. I don't know who that is. And then, obviously, at Hail Varsity, you can follow us on Twitter there, too. But hailvarsity.com. I feel like Nebraska and Ohio State fans are like kindred spirits this year. Frost said he's going to be cheering for Ohio State outside of Saturday. I've always felt that way. Ohio State fans have always been amazing to me. So I was like, where have you all been? I've always known this.
And we feel like Nebraska fans are the anti-Penn State fans.
Hey, there you go. That's enough for me.
Erin, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the Silver Bullets with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks once again to Erin Sorensen from Hail Varsity for coming on and telling us a little bit about the Huskers. It was nice to have her on.
Oh, yeah. Terrific job. I think she was very objective in terms of where she sees Nebraska, in terms of where they are and being able to articulate, kind of what she envisions for this coming year.
Yeah, we're going to try to do that throughout the year. This is kind of new. If you're new to the Silver Bullets podcast, Chip and I have not traditionally gone to guests very much, so this is going to be something new and fun that we're going to add this year, I think. And we've already got next week's guest lined up to talk about Penn State, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
I haven't even told you about it yet.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. So before you and I get into what our predictions are and our picks to click, because we're gonna bring back the picks to click. I feel like that went over very well with our listeners, even though not a single listener ever emailed me and said, "Hey, I really like your picks to click." I'm just assuming that they all love the picks to click, so we're gonna stick with that. And that should be entertaining since we've seen not one down of football. Or really any too much video from camp this year. But we're going to get to that. But first we're going to get to our questions, because you can ask us questions about the Ohio State Buckeyes on Twitter. You can hit me up. I'm at Mike36Fan, and Chip is at Chip Minnich, and his last name is spelled Minnich, so it's all one word, at Chip Minnich and at Mike36Fan. Please send us your questions. We'll be happy to answer them on the air, and we're going to do just that right now from an individual who wrote to us on Twitter and said, this is Tristan Saunders. I wonder if he's related to CJ Saunders.
Never know. Could ask. No.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
Let us know. All right, who will be the more dangerous / dominant running back this year for the Buckeyes? Would that be Master Teague or Trey Sermon?
I'm going to go with Trey Sermon. As you said quite accurately, that we have not seen any, very limited, news coming out of camp. It's nothing against Master Teague. I think Trey Sermon, the versatility that he offers as not only a runner but as a receiver, I know that that's an area that Master Teague was probably needing to work on. And this is not meant to ridicule or mock Master Teague, but he did have that injury in the spring that set him back. So minus the lack of spring practice, the disjointed summer practices, I think Trey Sermon, I think, he's shown to be a good receiver out of the backfield coming from Oklahoma. And I think he may prove to be the more dangerous of the two going into the 2020 season.
Yeah, it's really kind of two questions from Tristan here. I think it's who will be the more dangerous and who will be the more dominant. I think these are kind of two different things. I think that they could even mean different things. I think that this might be kind of like 2 years ago for Ohio State, where the carries or the series are maybe split more evenly than we're used to. I don't really have anything to base this off of yet, but it's just kind of a gut feeling that Trey Sermon may be like nominally the starter coming in, but I think we'll see a lot of Master Teague, and I think this will be a case of where maybe Trey Sermon is more dangerous in terms of maybe breaking big plays, but maybe when you think of dominance, maybe you think of Master Teague for just wearing out the defense, and then especially in the second half of games, ripping off 20 and 30-yard runs constantly because the other team is worn down. So I think this could be both.
I can see that. Kind of like a thunder and lightning type of
thing? Yeah. So it might be a cop-out answer. I don't know, but I just kind of going with my gut here. I think that, like we saw Weber and Dobbins for a year, I think we're going to kind of see Sermon and Teague, and I don't know from week to week what the case will be. I think this is a year where I think it's actually good or smart for Ryan Day not to put out a depth chart in advance of the season where he can come out and say, okay, this is a Sermon or Teague as the number one running back, and then he can kind of adjust that as he goes. And if somebody kind of seizes the job, then maybe it won't be the split that we had 2 years ago, if that's the case. But I certainly think that both of these backs are different. They bring different things to the table. They show you a different look, and you can use them in different packages. Certainly you would think that a Master Teague would be your goal line vulture, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So, really appreciate the question, Tristan. It's definitely going to be fun to watch and see how this develops. But maybe this is something we can revisit after 3 or 4 games and kind of see, if what we thought in the beginning has come to pass or if it's different than either of us thought.
No, I think very good point. Since we're flying blind, that the lack of visibility, the lack of news, kind of has us surmising to the best of our knowledge. And starting at noon on Saturday, we'll see how accurate or inaccurate we are.
Exactly. I have to say, Chip, one of the things that since you and I last talked that has been really prominent in the Buckeye news department is how many black stripes keep coming off guys' helmets. Have you been keeping up with all this?
I have been. It's very, very encouraging to see that the recruiting rankings that are high, that the players that they have brought into the program are acclimating themselves quickly and being classified as quote unquote, ready to go, to contribute by their big brothers that they have been assigned within their position group. So yeah, it's very, very exciting to see.
Yeah, I'm in. Obviously once they got into pads and they started, really going through real practices and preparing for the season, it was a little bit easier for the coaching staff to really evaluate them. But we know, Trey Sermon had to come in and get his black stripe taken off, and he got his off first back in September, middle of September. And, since then, just a bunch of guys. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Court Williams, is it Gee or G Scott? I keep screwing this up.
I think it's G, but
G.
I
Scott
made a
Jr.
mistake.
Ty Hamilton, Julian Fleming, Mayan Williams, Josh Fryer, Lathan Ransom, Cameron Martinez, Paris Johnson, Mookie Cooper, Mitchell Melton, Luke Whippler, Ryan Watts, and Jacob James, all getting that stripe off their helmets. And, good for you guys. Your Buckeyes, welcome to the team. You still got a lot of work to do, but it's a good step on the road to being a full-fledged Buckeye. The other thing that we didn't that we need to touch on is some bad news this week with Court Williams being out for the season with an ACL injury.
Yeah, it's rather unfortunate. As you said, he was one of those freshmen that not only earned the black stripe removal, but was being talked up by Ryan Day and the coaches, and granted, as a true freshman, how likely was it that he was going to play a significant amount? I mean, I genuinely don't know, but it was certainly the kind of thing where he was classified as kind of that vaunted bullet position that we've heard so much about but have seen so little of. But he kind of seemed to fit the bill with that linebacker safety ability. So best wishes to Court Williams for a rapid recovery and getting out on the field for 2021. I mean, just follow doctor's orders, listen to Coach Mick, do what you need to do to make sure that this injury does not take any longer than it needs to for you to get back on the field.
I thought Williams was a good candidate to get some playing time this year, especially with, thinner safety position. I think that he was maybe not even going to redshirt. I think he could have gotten those kind of minutes, that kind of play count this year, that much of the rotation. But Court Williams will have to work his way back from this injury, and I guess it's a good thing that Lathan Ransom has been able to get his black stripe off, because he may be called upon a little bit earlier than we expected.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point about the redshirting, to do that or not to do that, considering just the completely, awkward situation that everybody is in as it relates to the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess you don't lose a year this
right.
year, so it's not really like he would have lost the year. But that's certainly one of those things in a normal year where you'd get that fourth game in and you go, well, maybe do we need Court Williams the rest of the year? And I think that they would have. I think they would have used him anyway.
Right. But yeah, I think the completely awkward year that 2020 has been and continues to be, one thing that, regardless of whether we're talking Ohio State playing Nebraska or at Penn State or whoever, is I genuinely hope that the coaches liberally play as many players as possible, because of the fact that with the rules that the Big Ten has implemented with regards to participation, if somebody tests positive, they're withheld from action for 21 days, basically 3 games. And my point being is it's going to be imperative for the coaches to get I don't care if we're talking about a true freshman offensive lineman. Get these guys in and get them some reps because you never know.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound pessimistic. I want to sound realistic, and that is get some playing time for these guys because you're seeing it across the country. I don't see why any Ohio State fan or Big Ten fan would think that your respective program is going to be immune to any kind of issues. So play as many guys as possible. Get the starters out after you have the game seemingly in hand, and just play as many people as possible.
Yeah, well said. One other thing I want to talk to you about before we get to our picks to click and talk a little bit more about Nebraska is the Big Ten preseason honorees, which it's always weird to be a preseason all Big Ten or all Big anything or all anything. The preseason, it means nothing. But Wyatt Davis, Justin Fields, and Sean Wade among those who made the cut. Did anybody get slighted in your opinion, Chip?
If there's going to be a slight, maybe, and this is just because I think he's been underrated ever since he stepped on campus. I'll go with Chris Olave, simply because Chris Olave, he's going into his junior year. Let's face it, it's not going to be a surprise to me if Chris Olave is earning a paycheck from an NFL team next year at this time. And Chris Olave is one of those guys, you and I freely admit, when it comes to recruiting, we follow, but we really don't, in terms of, okay, like we know who Ohio State has signed, but we don't really get caught up in all of the accolades and the hype. And the reason I'm just bringing this up is that Chris Olave was one of these guys that was considered, all right, he was one of the last people to sign with Ohio State for his recruiting class, was not really that highly touted, and has made a tremendous impact for Ohio State his first 2 years at wide receiver. And again, I think he's underrated because, he makes big plays, but he just seems to fly under the radar, which I'm fine with. Mm-hmm. You underestimate Chris Olave at your own peril opposing Big Ten defenses.
Right? Yeah, I mean, Chris Olave is exactly the guy I was thinking of when I asked you who, if anyone got slighted, because he got slighted. And the reason is quite simple. Ohio State runs so many receivers out there that are all very, very talented that it kind of eats into their numbers. And so somebody who, might be a good receiver but plays for a school that doesn't have the depth Ohio State has might have twice the yards, twice the catches, twice the touchdowns because they're on the field for every play, and they have to do that. And Chris Olave doesn't have to carry that heavy a load with Ohio State because you have these other guys. So it's a little deceptive, but you can be a better player than someone else and not put up the same numbers.
Completely agree. Well said.
All right. One last thing, the Jeff Brom situation. Jeff Brom of Purdue tests positive for COVID-19. So we haven't even got started yet. We already have a coach missing opening day. And, this is an interesting situation because, like I touched on earlier, that, we had Nick Saban testing positive and then testing negative twice. And so he was cleared to play. It's cleared to be on the sideline. It's the SEC, so were there some shenanigans involved? Probably, but who's to say, really, for sure. So Brom is not going to be on the sideline. If this should happen to Ryan Day, but I don't think it will because Ryan Day has talked at great length about the precautions he's been taking. But if it did, who on that staff is the game day coach, do you think? Do you think it's Kerry Combs? Do you think it's someone else?
So I think it might be Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson, maybe I'm mistaken, but in terms of like the associate head coach title, I thought Larry Johnson had that. Now, maybe I'm mistaken in terms of game day responsibilities. Maybe it would fall to Kerry Combs, Kevin Wilson. I really don't know how that would happen. Let's hope for the best that it. Ryan Day certainly seems that to be truly practicing what he preaches in terms of, I see him, wearing masks and practicing social distancing, and let's just hope that continues. But yeah, that's a really good question. It might be Larry Johnson though.
It could, and you're right. He's his title is associate head coach. But I just wonder, because he's got that experience doing it. Maybe it is Kevin Wilson.
It wouldn't be. I would feel comfortable with Kevin Wilson. I'd feel comfortable with Kerry Combs, and those. I know that he is well beloved, rightfully so, by the defensive line because he's their position coach. But I would believe that every one of those players, regardless of position, offensive or defense, has a very healthy, genuine respect for Larry Johnson. I think that he is the kind of guy that if that event were to take place, I think Larry Johnson would be able to command the ship very well.
All right, well said. And I think it's time to get to this week's game. We're here. We're at the end of the show. And it's time for us to get to it. Chip, these are our picks to click and our score predictions. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Nebraska. The Cornhuskers, last year they averaged 28 points a game on offense. The problem was they gave up 28 points a game on defense, which is kind of even-steven. But I think that their offense is going to be better this year, and I think their defense is going to be a little bit better this year. The question is, how much better?
Yes. We kind of talked about it earlier with regards to, Erin Sorensen being able to kind of articulate some of the challenges. What I want to see as it relates to this game is one of the concerns that Ohio State has going into not only this game, but throughout the season is the Ohio State interior defensive line. That's not to imply that there's not talent, because there is. There's not a lot of depth at that interior defensive line. So the concern I have is how well does that interior defensive line hold up against a Nebraska offensive line that may try to, in terms of being able to sustain drives, being able to, will Ohio State be able to shut them down on short yardage plays that instead of it being 3rd and 2 and Nebraska runs up the middle and for like a 3 or 4 yard gain and convert that into another set of downs, 1st and 10. How well will that Ohio State defensive line hold up against that Nebraska offensive line and other Big Ten offensive lines throughout the season?
It's a good question, because with Nebraska, you're not expecting them to be pass happy, so you're not going to get the relief of bringing in the rushmen package as often against the Nebraska. So I think that you're right, that they have to try to make plays on 1st and 2nd down that puts the kind of plays that will put Nebraska in 3rd and long and enable them to get the rushmen package on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the defensive end is a player that I'm going to be kind of anxious to see how we were just talking about Larry Johnson, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I've always looked at Tyler Friday as the kind of player who, it would not surprise me that he would kind of have that, almost like that Jayshon Cornell type, he could be a hybrid end tackle. He just, in terms of just the body type that I see on television. Now, granted, I know that you and I don't have the luxury of actually being there in person and watching practice. Then again, nobody does anymore with all the COVID restrictions. But it wouldn't surprise me if Tyler Friday is used in that hybrid tackle end role in an effort to kind of get him on the field and give maybe some of those other interior defensive linemen a break. Like you said, trying to rotate players off, because you can't, as great as Tommy Togiai is, he can't play every snap. I mean, you just can't. So it's going to be imperative that Larry Johnson figures out some kind of an interior defensive line rotation that will work, not only against Nebraska, but any other team Ohio State plays.
Absolutely. You just reminded me of a guy who played on the edge and then was moved inside and had a really great career for Ohio State. It was Adolphus Washington.
Very good one.
Yeah.
Very, very. He always seemed to me like that is not meant as a slight on Adolphus Washington. He always seemed to me a likely candidate.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of his frame. When it comes to Tyler Friday, I know that he arrived here as a defensive end. I remember thinking that when the first time I saw him playing, I thought, man, that guy almost looks like a tackle to me. So, and we may be mistaken. I don't want to include you. I'll go out on. I'll say I may be mistaken, but it seems to me that he would be a likely hybrid candidate for Larry Johnson. But we'll see.
You could be right. He could be Diesel too. The second coming. All right, it's time to get to our picks to click. I need an offensive and defensive Buckeye that you pick to click against the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Okay. I know that I was just raving about Chris Olave in terms of, and this is not meant to disparage Chris Olave because I'm sure I will pick him later on. The guy who I really think offensively is going to have not only a big game but a big season is sophomore wide receiver Garrett Wilson. That's my offensive guy. I think he certainly had his moments last year as a freshman. I think he's going to have many more of them as a sophomore beginning this coming Saturday. And on the defensive side, this is because I just been hearing when we talk about rumblings and players who have kind of flashed. I'm going to go with safety Marcus Hooker.
Okay, it's a good pick. I'm gonna take the house money on the first one. Offensively, I think that this young man has been dying to get on the field this year. He's been a leader off the field all year. He's gone vegan to improve his game and his physique. I think he's just really motivated and really committed. I think Justin Fields is going to have, again, not like you said, a monster game and also a monster year. So maybe it's a cheat to pick Justin Fields because he touches the ball in every snap, but he might be on the sideline at halftime. Who knows?
Never know.
Defensively, I'm going to go with the guy who you just slighted a bit ago by saying we didn't really see the bullet. But we did see the bullet last year, Chip. You just didn't know it because it was Pete Werner. Pete Werner was, for all intents and purposes, was the bullet last year. And I'm going to go with him. I think he's going to have a lot of tackles in this game because I think that Nebraska's going to attack the edges, and that's going to force him to make some plays.
Like it.
All right. So there you go. We've got our picks to click. They're locked in. And now, Chip, it's time to predict the score. What's the final score going to be at the end of the game on opening day when the Huskers visit Ohio Stadium?
All right. I respect what Erin said. I think it is going to be more of a shootout. I just don't think it's going to be as much of a shootout as Erin believes. I do believe that the defensive sides for both teams are going to struggle to kind of get acclimated, and so I'm going to go with Ohio State 38, Nebraska 20.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go a little higher scoring than you. I think that there may be defensive scores involved. But I'm going to say 49-27 Ohio State. And
okay.
I think maybe Nebraska gets a late touchdown on some backups to get that 27th point, that extra touchdown or whatever. But that's kind of where my head's at right now. I think the Buckeyes are going to come out like like we've never seen a team on opening day before in terms of commitment and passion. Now, of course, if there were 105,000 people in the stands, that might sustain them throughout the entire game. So it's anything can happen after kickoff. You know, the mood of the game, the momentum of the game could change. But I think that this is a team that has just been so laser focused this offseason that I think they're going to be ready for this. A little bit more ready than you typically see them, you know, if they come out and they're playing an Akron or somebody on opening day.
No, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense.
All right. Well, the great thing is we get to come back next week and see how we did.
Right.
And sometimes it's pretty close and sometimes not close at all. So
exactly.
It's almost like you can't predict what's going to happen in college football sometimes. But, yeah, it's been fun finally getting to do a game week podcast with you, Chip. It's, here we are recording this at the beginning of the week, and the Buckeyes will be playing on the Saturday, the 24th. Is that even correct?
That is correct.
Ugh. The 24th of October, Chip. My goodness.
I know.
And that's opening day. That's not like – that's usually like a Michigan State weekend or something.
Well, yeah, to put it in context, that it actually – here's the deal, is that it was supposed to be at Penn State. So think about if everything had stayed, you know, the life that you and I – and everyone else was accustomed to, it would have been a night game at Penn State. Instead, it's a, in your words, a big nude kickoff on Fox at 12 p.m.
That's right. Pantsless. That's the way to go. All right. Chip, remind everybody where they can find you on the internet and how they can ask you a question for the Silver Bullets podcast.
Yes, I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minnich. And obviously, besides like Michael contributing to Buckeye Scoop with this podcast, on the internet, I can be found as a contributor as well for Athlon Sports. So you can find me writing sometimes about Ohio State, but about other college football teams as well there. All
right. There are other college football teams? How about that? Who knew?
Yeah, that's what the editors of Athlon Sports tell me.
Okay. You can find me on Twitter at Mike36Fan. Of course, you can also find me at Buckeye Scoop. I'm going to be bringing the grumpy old Buckeye to the Buckeye Scoop. This is a column that I started at the ozone.net when we were over there, and it's basically me just griping about everything that bugged me during the game. It might be very tongue-in-cheek one week. It might be extremely serious the next week. Or even within the same column, it might have one or two items that are pretty serious and one or two that are like, oh, I can't believe that they failed to down the punt inside the 10 or something when they were up 49 points or something like that. It just depends on how the game is going. But I hope you enjoy it. I look forward to your feedback, and I look forward to bringing the grumpy old Buckeye over to Buckeye Scoop. Be sure to, this is a great time of year, Chip. They tell me this is the time of year that you should become a member of Buckeye Scoop.
They are absolutely correct. If you have not taken advantage of everything that the Buckeye Scoop has to offer, you are cheating yourself. You're cheating the ones you love, because there are so many great areas of not only just podcasts, but also articles that are offered up. The Ask the Insiders area. I mean, there's just a treasure trove of information that's readily available on BuckeyeScoop.com.
Letting down your loved ones. I was not expecting that.
Hey, gotta call it like I see it.
All right. In addition to this fine podcast, the Silver Bullets, you can, of course, catch the other Buckeye Scoop programs that are fantastic as well. You got Gives and the Bank. You've got the Scoop World Order. You got the Morning Scoop. That's our daily with Tom Moore. and of course, the Buckeye Weekly with Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr as well. And there's the Sloop Cast. They came over with us from the Ozone. Just a bunch of great podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to all of them, and please, if you want to help us, but you can't be bothered to pay us, and we can't be bothered to set up a Patreon anyway. If you want to help us out, just go to iTunes and give us a star rating and write a review. We really appreciate that. I think I covered. Did I cover everything? I think I covered everything.
You did.
All right, Chip. There's nothing left but to go forth and watch the Buckeyes and the Cornhuskers this week, and then come back and talk about it next week and get prepared for Penn State. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you again to Erin Sorensen from Hail Varsity for coming on and telling us about the Huskers, and we'll be back to do it next week. Let's sign off the way we always do, Chip. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!